Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of All Automotive. I'm your host, Matt Clausen. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about some of the things that you should do to your car before you hit wintertime. Hey, it's the first part of December. Winter doesn't officially start until December 21st. And hey, I live in Michigan, so it snows here quite a bit. And, there is the opportunity to be in that kind of weather. So we want to check out our car and some of the things that we need to check before we get into winter. It's just a good idea to either have the repair facility that you like to frequent, take a look at your vehicle and see if there are some things that need to be addressed before winter. But there's some things that you can do that I've come up with. I've come up with a list of about 10. And I'll go through them here really quick for you. So one of the first things that I always like to check going into winter, there's some of the obvious things. Number one, we want to check our wiper blades. It's very important to make sure that the wiper blades are not leaning over. If you look across the bottom of them, are they standing up tall and they work okay? A lot of times it's not something that we think about until it's snowing or until it's raining. And we can't see, or there's a streak over here, and you know what? For me, when wiper blades go bad, they always go bad right where you're looking. The streak isn't above where you're looking. It's right in the middle of where you're looking when you're going down the road. And this obviously presents a safety issue, and we want to make sure that we're taking care of these before it gets cold out. Now, a lot of the cars out there have the same style setup. If you are comfortable with going into an auto parts store, you can get these wiper blades, and they're relatively inexpensive, and you can get them at Walmart or any of the big box grocery stores even have them. They're very readily available, and I would recommend going to a parts store because 9 times out of 10 those guys will come out and help you put them on. Or if you stop by our shop, we're more than willing to go out there and put these wiper blades on and get you all set up. So that's one of the things we want to look at. So let's go back to that. One of the things we want to look at when you look across the windshield from the left side of the vehicle to the right side of the vehicle, you can look at the wiper blade and see if it's actually laying down. And what I mean by laying down is that the blade is actually tipped back or flattened down, and it just doesn't look good. So, I mean, you'll be able to tell it. It should stand straight up and look like the letter I. If it's flipped down and folded down and looks like the letter L, then that's not good. And you want to take care of those. And if you don't really remember when the last time you changed your wiper blades was, it's probably a good idea to get those things changed. And again, it does present a safety issue. It's one of the things that you want to make sure that you keep up on before you get to winter. The wiper blades are a very important thing, especially in the wintertime, because when the salt and stuff is flying around and you're driving through the wet roads and you're going down the highway, I mean, we're constantly using those wiper blades. And if the cleaner you can keep your window, the better off you are. And then that's the other thing. The other thing we want to check that's related to the wiper blades is, number one, let's check our washer operation to make sure the windshield washers spray. And if they're not spraying, and go ahead and make your appointment with your auto repair facility of choice and let them get that taken care of for you. A lot of times, that's a very, very simple repair for most of us shops. We don't have an issue with taking care of that. There's very few working parts in a windshield washer system, and most of the time it's just a washer pump that's not working if the washers are not working. If it's spraying and working good, then we're all set. So then grab that gallon of blue windshield washer fluid or the purple stuff, whatever you feel is necessary for your area. We install the 20 below zero stuff that does not freeze. Pour it in, fill it up, make sure it's full. And most of those will take about a gallon or so. So the wiper blades, the washer operation, and then fill up the washer tank. And then moving on. So next thing we want to check is all the lights. We want to make sure all of our lights are working, because most of the time when it's snowing, the visibility is low and we need to turn our lights on, or our vehicle will turn the lights on for us. Most of the vehicles nowadays have warnings that let you know these bulbs are burned out or that you're having an issue with this light. that's helpful if you're not sure. And of course, the gentleman behind you beeping the horn because you have a brake light out, and he's willing to tell you at the next stoplight. So something you want to take a look at, obviously, the brake lights. Have a helper come out and stand behind the car while the vehicle is running and in park, or with the emergency brake on, step on the brake pedal to make sure the high-level stop lamp works and the two on the body are working in good working order. And again, some cars will tell you that the lights are burned out and needs to be addressed. I know my Silverado does that. So it's a good feature to have if you have that on your, if not, then again, just grab a friend and say, hey, can you stand behind here? I'm checking my lights. Then we want to check the headlights, the turn signals to make sure the turn signals are working correctly. Turn it on, turn the turn signals on while that person's standing behind you checking the brake lights. Hey, I'm going to turn the turn signals on. Let me know if those are working okay. Turn those on. You can leave your car running, turn the turn signals on, 4 ways on. Make sure those are in good working order. And then the headlights. Headlights are very important for nighttime visibility and also inclement weather visibility. Important enough to make sure that they both are working. A lot of cars are having issues with the headlights getting frosted over. The plastic degrades over time and they get to where they don't shine as bright as they used to. And if that's an issue, again, seek us out and tell us, hey, these aren't working really well, and we're most of the time going to be able to replace those headlights and give you a cost breakdown on what it's going to take to change those headlights out. Just give us a call. Say, hey, Matt, I'm having trouble with my 2007 Impala. This is just really not shining as bright as they used to. We can get those headlight assemblies. Most of the time I can get those as a pair, and they come with all new bulbs. We just have to take the old ones out, plug the new ones in, and away you go. And if you do have a headlight out and it's not all foggy and you don't have that issue, then the bulbs are readily available. And again, it's another parts store thing. If you think it's something that you can tackle, and some cars have owner's manuals that tell you how to change the headlight bulbs. Most of them aren't difficult to do, but on certain vehicles, a lot of stuff's got to come off in order to get those headlight bulbs out of there. And if that's the case, and there are certain vehicles that the entire front bumper needs to come off so that we can get to bolts that hold these headlights to the body to get them off so that we can change out the bulbs. It's a very good idea. If you're having the shop or going to the trouble of changing just the one that's burned out, you better change the other one because it doesn't make sense to not do both at that time. So get your headlights fixed. Check the high beams and the low beams. Some cars have separate high beams, then low beams. And some cars have the high intensity discharge headlights, which are the bright ones that are shining out there nowadays that a lot of the newer cars are going to. It's a very bright and intense headlight that if those bulbs are burned out, those are a little bit more costly than the incandescent ones of any other car that would be out there. So again, just give us a call. Tell us what your model is. We can tell you pretty much over the phone what it's going to take to replace both headlights if you need both headlights, and how much it's going to cost and what kind of bulb it's going to take. So again, just walk around the vehicle and all the parking lights too. You want to make sure all the running lights are on so that when the people are behind you can see that you have your headlights on. That's what the running lights are for, the parking lights, if you will. And check those too. They're on the front and the rear. A lot of those bulbs are not very difficult to change. We change them all the time and don't really have too many issues. So the other thing, let's move on to the next thing. Now that we've got the wiper blades and the headlights taken care of, let's look at some of the things that we might not think that we should check. So if you're comfortable with it, I would say that maybe you could get under the hood and check all the under hood fluids. Let's check the brake fluid level. Let's check, we've already added to the washer fluid. So while we've got the hood up, let's check and see what other fluids that we need to fill up. So when we're filling these fluids, I like to work my way from the driver's side around to the passenger side. And depending on your vehicle, you'll encounter several different things as you walk around. And most generally, the first thing we run into, it's right up by the firewall. It's attached to the brake master cylinder. It's the brake fluid reservoir. I don't really recommend taking that cap off because you can get dirt or water in that fluid if you're not careful, and that's not good for that system. So most of those reservoirs have a clear or a see-through reservoir so that you can see the fluid level. And if you just take your hand and shake the top of it, you can see where that level is and move on from there. If it's a little bit low, most of the time on the cap, it tells you what kind of fluid to put in. Most cars take a .4 brake fluid or a .3 brake fluid, so you can add that accordingly. And again, it's something that if you want us to check the fluids and we do an oil change for you, it's something that we can do at any time for you. And this is also a winter inspection that we can do for you as well. So moving along, we've checked the brake fluid. We're walking around. We see the coolant overflow tank. And again, another thing that I don't recommend you taking the lid off of if it is a pressurized system and you just drove your vehicle. Think of it like your pressure cooker or your Instapot, that thing you use in the kitchen to cook food at a faster rate. So the systems on the cars that hold the coolant are pressurized and will have pressure in them after you've driven the car, especially because the fluid heats up and the expansion of that fluid causes pressure. And also the system has a cap on it, which holds up to 16 to 20 pounds of pressure at any given time. So if you've driven the vehicle, I do not recommend taking that cap off. Please don't take that cap off if your vehicle is hot or the engine has been run. You will run the risk of spraying yourself with fluid that is over 220 degrees. So it's like boiling water and then some. So coolant burns from experience are not very fun, and I don't recommend taking that cap off. And again, it's another reservoir that most likely is see-through and has a level that you can see through the side without taking that cap off. If the vehicle's cold and you haven't driven it, you've gone out there in the morning, you haven't gone anywhere, you can take that cap off carefully because it still may have some pressure, and you'll get the little and that cap will come off and you can look down in there if you so desire. But again, I do not recommend taking that cap off if your vehicle has been run or is at operating temperature. Again, because you do run the risk of burning yourself with the hot coolant if it did spray out at you, or the steam that comes out. So it's just like your Instapot. So when you're done cooking in the Instapot, you can push that little button in the back and twist it so the steam comes out, right? So you can depressurize it. So that steam is the same temperature as the coolant is going to be when it's coming out too, or that steam. So be very careful of that. So if you're comfortable with that and you want to take the cap off, by all means, move forward with that if you'd like. If you don't want to, and I don't recommend taking it off, again, I can't stress this enough. Please do not take that cap off if you've run the vehicle and it's at operating temperature. Again, most of those you can see through them and you can see the level and you can see if it's low or not. And then, wait till the vehicle cools off all the way before we add some fluid to it. And if you do have coolant readily available, I recommend getting the coolant that is pre-mixed. That's already 50-50, so you don't have to worry about getting the distilled water to pour in there to make your straight coolant a 50-50 mixture. And what the good part and the benefit of a 50-50 mixture of coolant is that it creates a freezing rate of minus 34 degrees below zero. So, and my joke to everyone that comes in and I check their coolant is I think if it gets any colder than that in Michigan, I'm definitely going to move south. But that's actual degrees. That's not wind chill of 34, and you're not going to run the risk of freezing, because the straight coolant will in fact freeze at 6 below zero. So if you don't mix it with distilled water and a 50-50 mixture to create that mixture, it's not going to be good for you if you put straight coolant in there. So if you're comfortable with it, I always recommend getting the gallon jug that is pre-diluted, we call it. And we use a universal yellow coolant, which will mix with both the green and the red for the domestic vehicles. I know the foreign vehicles use a blue coolant, I know Volvo uses a blue coolant and Honda uses a blue coolant. And if it's a manufacturer specific coolant and the parts store has it, most likely in a pre-diluted form. So I would recommend, talking to those guys and gals and see what type of coolant I need to fill it. And again, a lot of those guys and gals, just like us, are more than willing to come out into the parking lot and top that off for you if necessary. So moving along, we've got the coolant checked. We've topped it off if we need to. We'll keep walking around. We have a hydraulic power steering system. Cap, just if the engine's off, that's the best way to check it. Twist that, pull it, take a look at it. If it's low or discolored in any way, there might be an issue you want to address with your service facility. All these manufacturers have specific power steering fluids, but for the most part, most of them are universal. So if you're driving a 2007 Impala, Chevy Impala, then you can get the power steering fluid that's on the shelf at any parts store and get that filled up. Some of them, like Ford's, will be okay with using automatic transmission fluid or a Motorcraft type Mercon 5 fluid to fill up their power steering fluids. And again, just consult your owner's manual to see if it's something that you want to tackle. Each vehicle is different. For the most part, they either take automatic transmission fluid in a synthetic form. I know Chrysler's take their synthetic transmission fluid, and Ford's will take a synthetic transmission fluid. And then maybe your car has electronic power steering and doesn't require a fluid. So it's one less fluid that you got to check. So moving along from the power steering fluid, if the engine is off and you can locate your engine oil dipstick, just grab a rag, pull it out, wipe it off, put the dipstick back in until it's fully seated. Pull it back out, take a look at it. Is the oil level to the full mark? And most dipsticks, engine oil level indicators will tell you that the oil is full at a certain point. So if it's in what we call an operating range, which has some hash marks, or some vehicle dipsticks will have dots, like 4 of them, if you will. So each one of those dots indicates a quarter of a quart, or that whole operating range is 1 quart of oil. So consult your owner's manual or look on your oil fill cap for the proper weight of oil. And if your oil is below that operating range, you may add 1 quart of oil to fill the vehicle back up. And again, most cars will have that oil viscosity. And when I say viscosity, it's 5W30, 5W20, 0W20, and so on. So there's different manufacturers require different weights of oils, and it's normally on the oil level cap or oil fill cap. So going from the engine oil to the transmission fluid. Now, a lot of the cars nowadays do not have a dipstick to pull out and check the transmission fluid level. But if you have a dipstick that has a red end on it, most likely that's a transmission dipstick. And we can, again, pull that out, wipe it off, put it back in there, and pull it back out and see where it's indicating. Now, the difference between the transmission and the engine oil is that we want the engine running, most likely in park, while we're checking this transmission fluid level, because we need that transmission pump turning and pumping the fluid around to create the level that they require. So if you pull that out and it's low, normally 1 pint or half of a quart, we'll bring that back from the low part of the operating range to the full part of the operating range. Now, a lot of those want you to check it at operating temperature. So when the vehicle's at operating temperature, it's the best time to check your fluid. Not the best time to check your coolant, however. So you're going to have to, if you're going to check your transmission fluid level, take it out for a spin, come back, check it when you get back. Check the coolant before you go on the spin. So just to keep that in mind. So now we've covered pretty much all the fluids under the hood: the brake fluid, the power steering fluid, the coolant, the engine oil level, and the transmission fluid level. So all of those are things that we want to check. If you don't have a shop and you do a lot of stuff yourself, it's just something to keep in mind and something that we would check when we would look at your car for the winter time. So now that we've got the lights, the under hood fluids, we've looked at our wiper blades and filled up the washer fluid. Let's think about the heater operation. It's not something, hey, in the summertime, we're not really worried about it. We aren't worried about it. We're worried about the air conditioner in the summertime. So when it gets to the fall, a lot of times we're going to get into these concerns where, hey, I don't have heat. But when it's 30 degrees out, we really kind of need the heat in the vehicle to warm up so it's comfortable for the passengers and we can go down the road and not have all of our ski equipment and big heavy coats and gloves on while we're driving. So is the heater operation working? Do you have temperature? Is the temperature of the heat good? So the other thing we want to check is the blower, the fan blower operation. Do you have like 5 different speeds? Does it work on all 5 speeds, or does it only work on 5? Or does it not work at all? Things that we need to address before we get going into the heavy part of the winter. Then a lot of times people don't check this, but it's something that we want to keep in mind too, is can we turn the mode to defrost and defrost our windows? Is the airflow coming out there, or is it stuck on blowing out the vent? So if it's stuck in the vent and you turn it to defrost and it's still blowing out the vents, you got a problem. So we need to address that. So we need to get it in, get it scheduled. Let's look and see why we're not getting airflow from the defroster. Again, another safety issue. Windows frozen from the night, sitting overnight. It's all frosted up. We need to get defrost. We need to have our defrost working. How about the rear window defrost? The rear window defrost is important as well. Is that working? Is it clearing the window off? Does it not work at all? We have ways of checking that. It's not very hard. We can check to see if that grid's getting power and if it's not working correctly. If the grid is broken, does the grid need to be repaired, and so forth. So heater operation, do we got good temperature heat? Is the blower working okay? Can we get to the defrost, and does the rear defrost work? So moving on from that, another thing that we would want to check would be our door locks, our door handles. Do the door locks work? You know, a lot of these new cars, they've got key fobs and push button start, and you don't have door locks anymore. But if you got door locks where you can stick a key in and turn it to unlock it, does that actually work? Because if it gets water in it and it freezes up, it's not going to work. It's going to freeze and you're not going to be able to turn it to unlock it, because you have power locks that lock it, but are you going to be able to unlock it? So does our key fob work? Does our actual fob that unlocks the car, are you having an issue with that? Those batteries in there, they should be replaced at least once a year. They come right apart. They're not very hard to take apart. Again, it's another thing that the parts store has. Most likely they can put those together and put those batteries in there. If not, we are certainly able to do that. We have those batteries in stock, and I keep those on hand because we do have issues with those key fobs not working. Because if you get out of a concert or somewhere and it's been snowing and blowing and it's 10 below zero and you're trying to unlock your car and it won't unlock, it's not very good when you can't go back inside somewhere. So that's something that we want to check too. Does the key go in and does it turn both ways? Can you lock it and unlock it with the key? Because if the door locks lock it, the electric door locks, and that fails, the backup is your key. So make sure that that's working too. And then the door handles. Does the inside door handle work? Does the outside door handle work? Are you having trouble with that? That's another thing that we want to take a look at and make sure that we're getting those working and are in good working order and work well. So the door locks, door handles, are those all working? So the next thing, and this is important, does your driver's window go up and down? If not, then, the drive-through is going to be a little challenge, and paying a toll, that's going to be a challenge. So does the driver's window go up and down with no issue? Most of the time we're using our heater and the windows are up. We don't need to put the windows down, but it's a good idea to be able to put that window down so that we can warm the vehicle up and not lock ourselves out of the vehicle. So the windows, let's make sure all the windows are working. Moving on from that, we got the door handles fixed. We got all the fluids checked. The lights are good. The underhood fluids, we've all checked all that. We've got our wiper blades working, the door handles and so forth. Let's look at our tires. This is a very important thing that if you're not paying attention to all summer long, that's something that could reach up and grab you pretty quick. And one of the things I always tell my customers is that if you are in need of tires in about 2 to 3 months and it's the summertime and we tell you that, it's pretty good idea to get them changed in the fall. And this is late fall, early winter. The tire stores, including myself, we get very busy after the first snowfall because of the procrastination of not getting your tires in a decent amount of time. If the tires are at a low tread, they're not going to provide good snow traction. They're not going to provide good wet traction either. There are certain parts in the road that, the water will puddle up because of degrading roads, or the semis ride in the right lane and there's a little bit of dip in the road and the water collects there because the water can't run off. If your tires are 430 seconds or below, you should think about getting replacement tires. So let's talk about 430 seconds. So we don't have a tire tread depth gauge, and we've all read the adage and may or may not know this. If you get a penny and you can see the top of Lincoln's head when you stick it down in the tread between the ribs of the tread, if you can see the top of his head, it's time for tires, because the wear bar indicators that go across in between the two treads are 230 seconds, and that's too far. You lose wet traction at 530 seconds or below. So in the snow, where you want your deepest tread and your best tread, it's important to, hey, just bring it by. I've got a tire tread depth gauge. My service advisors are happy to go out and check your tread depth and give you a tire quote. Again, the tire stores do get very, very busy. It seems like right after the first snowfall because of the procrastination of getting tires, or we haven't been told, or whatever. Let's just go out and take a look at it and prevent having a scenario where you're frustrated at the tire store or at our shop where, hey, we've got 10 people ahead of you and we can't get you in right away, but you do need tires, and we're willing to work with your schedule. But a little bit of planning ahead on your part helps everyone, including myself and all the tire stores. If you're going out there with good old Abe, you find yourself a penny, stick it in between the treads, and if you can't see his head, most likely you've got pretty good tread on your tire. You might want to get a second opinion and go into the auto repair shop or the tire store and say, hey, can you come out and take a look at these and tell me what I'm looking at as far as wintertime? Because it's definitely not a good situation when you're slipping and sliding around and you need tires on your car. So let's go out and inspect all four of them and make sure. So the general rule of thumb is that you want the most tread from your tires in the rear. And the reason for this is if you get into a situation where you're in a skid or in an anti-lock brake event, to where you're in a panic stop, to where the anti-lock brakes are going off because you're in a slippery, snowy situation. The number one purpose of the anti-lock brakes is to keep you in a straight line of path, which means the back end of the car is not going to come around. But if you have the best tire tread in the rear, that helps ensure that the back end of your car is not going to come around because it's got the most tread. And that's a big misconception when it comes to the tire tread depth in the wintertime. Yes, you want decent tread all the way around, but you want to be able to have that peace of mind to where you're not going to come around in a spin and have to follow the rear of the vehicle per se, like you would if you were in a sprint car or racing a car and you're pitching the back end of it out. We've all seen the guys do the drifting and so forth. You don't want to drift in your car in the winter. So something to keep in mind. Something if you're living in Florida, you really don't have to worry about it. However, you do have to worry about it in Florida if you have tires that are below 430 seconds and you hit a puddle of water. You are going to surf with your whole car across that puddle of water. So imagine, if you will, you're on a boogie board or a surfboard and you're out in the ocean and you're sliding on your boogie board. Does your boogie board or your surfboard have tread? No, it's smooth, right? So you can get up on there and slide. Well, that's what happens to your tires. Once the water fills up those grooves, it becomes smooth, and then what we call hydroplane across the water. So again, it's not something that, hey, just in Michigan, we need to worry about our tread. We need to worry about our tread in all geographical areas and all temperatures and so forth. But it makes good sense in the wintertime that we're looking for a tread depth of more than 30 seconds. So get that penny, like I said, and stick it in there. If you're not looking at Abe Lincoln's head, then you're in good shape. So again, hey, some of the things that we want to check before we get into winter. So let's review some of the things we were talking about. Let's check the wiper blades. Next, let's check the underhood fluids if we're able to. And then the lights. Let's make sure all the lights are working, headlights included. The heater operation. Does your fan work? Oh, I hope so. And then the door locks, the door handles, are they all operational? And then the windows. Are the windows working good? And most importantly, the tires. Let's make sure our tires have good tread depth. Hey, that's it for another episode of All Automotive. This is Matt Clausen. Hey, thanks for listening to the third episode of All Automotive.